All right. So I think all of you can see my screen. My name is Hind, and myself and my colleague Sherelle are going to be presenting to you at least one of our pilots that we've conducted here in Detroit as a response to COVID-19. If you need the slides, they are in the handout box as a PDF, so you can easily download them from there. If you have any questions, please make sure that you leave those to the end. We will have a few minutes to discuss whatever questions you have. And if you need to connect with us, you can find us on LinkedIn, or we will be having our email addresses showing both at the beginning and at the end. So without further ado, Sherelle, we'll kick it off. Great. So Sherelle and I are both embedded consultants at the City of Detroit's Office of Mobility Innovation. So what that means is that we spend more than 90%, if not 100% of our time within the mayor's office. And what we do is essentially provide Detroit residents with solutions, with mobility solutions that fall in the realm between private car ownership and public transit. So anything that is in between is kind of our playground. So we will be presenting to you a project that hits quite a bit of sustainable development goals. However, in a nutshell, it really focuses on resilience as well as equity. For those of you who are joining us from outside of the US or from outside of Detroit, we wanted to give you a little bit of a context. So Detroit sits on about 140 square foot miles of surface. So it's a large city that has it's also a majority minority city. So we have the majority of our residents identifying as Black or African American. 70% of Detroiters work outside of the city. We also have the highest cost of car insurance, which is 4 times the national average in the US. And we've also gone through bankruptcies, which has made it really hard for residents to really trust city government. So as we do our work and as we move on through the presentation, it's important that you keep all of these things in mind, because that's also the context we work within. During COVID, we were hit pretty hard. We had actually at the peak of the pandemic, we had 400 cases a day, and we had at some point more than 50 deaths per day. However, we were able to hit back, and this was thanks to the mayor's leadership, but also to the collaboration and the cooperation with all of the Detroit residents. However, even after we were able to hit back, our residents were still suffering from the lack of transportation options, because just like other cities around the world, really, we were running at a reduced service and reduced hours for our bus system. So at OMI, we try to put people at the center of everything that we do. So we go through a human-centered design process to really explore what would work for our residents and really have them help us co-design and co-create what we bring to the streets. And that's really our approach through everything that we do. So when we were at the beginning of the pandemic, what happened was that we quickly understood that we needed to provide certain transportation services right off the bat. And one of them was to provide transportation to testing sites so that people can get the tests as soon as they could without worrying about having access to a car or to Lyft or whatever it is that they're used to using. However, when we were done with those services, we had to turn to focus on essential workers. But now as we talk about essential workers, we know who they are, we understand what kind of demographic they are, etc. However, at the beginning of the pandemic, we had no idea how they were getting to work, where they worked, who they were, where did they come from around the city. And so the first thing that we did is we designed this intake form that we sent to the 3 largest employers in the city and asked them to dispatch it through their employee base, and essentially asked them, how did you used to travel to and from work before the pandemic? How do you travel to and from work now? What times do you get to and from work? Where do you live? Where do you work? And lastly, which is also one of the most important questions we asked them, was if you had the choice, which of this list of mobility options would you choose to be able to get to work. So as we collected responses, once we got to about 480, we were able to start designing some solutions. And so we came up with 3 different pilots. However, today we will be focusing on a micromobility pilot that we did in partnership with the New Urban Mobility Alliance, Next Energy, which is a local fiscal sponsor, and the local bike share program. So the micromobility pilot essentially consisted of providing electric bikes and electric scooters to Detroit residents who also work within city limits, providing them these e-bikes and e-scooters at a one-time registration fee of $10, providing them with locks, with helmets and fluorescent vests to use all throughout the summer from mid-June all the way until the end of October. Initially, the program was supposed to end in September. However, residents did ask for an extended month, and we were able to provide that for them. So they were able to keep the bikes 24/7, use them however they wanted. When we called each and every one of them and said, you know, there's an option for you, we basically said that you can use it primarily to go to and from work. Like, we are providing it for you to go to work, to be able to help you with your commute. However, if it's a nice day outside, then feel free to go on a great bike ride or on a scooter ride. So people used it for various reasons, and we were able to capture some of that through different feedback loops that we designed and sent out as surveys, as well as anecdotal feedback. So some of the metrics that we were looking at was, first, the impact of this on the turnover rates and absenteeism and costs for employers. We know that, you know, some of the employers in town are really struggling with turnover rates and absenteeism, and large part of that is due to transportation or the lack of the availability of public transit in certain areas of the city. We also wanted to test for ease of employee commute. If Detroit residents thought that this was an easy way to get to and from work, or a viable way to get to and from work. And then lastly, we wanted to expand our constituency and support for for first and last mile solutions in Detroit. And when I talk about constituency and support, we talk about both from the resident side, but also from the employer side. So these are some of the results that we've gotten. So we've served a wide base of participants, mainly those between 19 and 54 years of age, but we also had representation for 55 to 65. The majority of the participants identified as Black or African American. Also, the majority made less than $50,000 a year. When we designed this micromobility pilot, we also understood that it was going to serve a section of the population that we wanted to serve, and this is because we understand the limitations of an electric bike and the limitations of an electric scooter. You know, namely the distance traveled, weather contingencies. So when we asked participants about how often they used it, how many times a day, how far they traveled within it, these were some of the results that we got. So for single trips, the most were between 3 and 6, and most participants traveled within 3 miles of their workplace. For on-time arrival, the responses were kind of like split between those who said that they arrive at the same time as before they use the micromobility options. However, we also had a high number of those who said that they are able to get to work more often than before. And just as a note, we were not able to have as many participants for the e-scooters. We actually only had 4 as opposed to 60 for the electric bikes. So what you're seeing here is really results from the electric bikes alone, and none from the e-scooters, because we were not able to get aggregated data for that. However, so we have the majority also, like more than 80% said that they thought that having access to an electric bike for 24/7 was very convenient for them to get to work. We've learned a lot throughout this pilot. First is that, as I said earlier, we had to call each and every participant that qualified for the program, which was about 180 calls that lasted anywhere between 10 and 45 minutes. Which was very tedious for my colleagues and I. However, when we asked participants, how was the registration process for you? Most of them said that it was very seamless, which we were very happy about, especially knowing that at that time, it was uncertain times. You know, they really liked that personal connection and understand. They liked the fact that they were able to ask questions on the phone directly to the project managers, as opposed to just like read a flyer and assume the rest. The other lesson learned was around behavior. We thought initially that maybe smartphone access was going to be an issue, maybe debit card or credit card access was going to be an issue. However, we were open to other options if participants needed other options. And we only had one participant say that they did not want to pay through their debit card and they wanted a cash option, and we were able to accommodate that as well. So really challenging those previously held notions, utilizing feedback loops. And then lastly, really learned a lot about the value of local partnerships, because although we did have a national partner who gave us, amazing national insight about micromobility around the US, it was really essential for us to partner with, for example, the local bike share program, who helped us tremendously in understanding how to even build a budget for maintenance, for example, for the bikes. We did not know that data. We did not know what kind of maintenance bikes would need in the streets here in Detroit, and they were able to help us through it. So for the 2021 iteration, we came up with 3 hypotheses that we wanted to test for. First is around community. So as I said, we had 60 participants who had the electric bikes, and half of them came from one grocery store. And we weren't sure whether this was a success because they were in a close-knit community where they biked together, they talked about the e-bikes, they placed the e-bikes in the same place, they parked them in the same place, and it kind of like was a great thing to have that summer. So this year we're testing if the behavior change was accelerated when participants belong to communities where biking is encouraged and practiced, or if it was just a niche that we tapped into. The second is, was the pilot successful because it was so cheap? Again, remember I said that the only barrier to entry was a $10 registration fee. However, for this program to be sustainable, we would need it to be a little more expensive than that, and to be on a leasing format, which Sherelle is going to be talking about in a little bit. So we didn't know whether it was successful because it was cheap, or if we can have better or similar or better results if we have a monthly leasing charge. And then lastly, we want to test for what are the barriers specific to Detroit and what is specifically preventing Detroit residents from biking to work. So without further ado, I'll hand it off to Sherelle, who will talk to you about how we're running the program this year.
Thanks, Hind. So this year, the Office of Mobility Innovation launched a 6-month pilot program that will run from May to October of 2021. The program consists of 2 offerings. The first is a bike challenge, which is an embedded program purpose to encourage biking and promote the already existing biking culture in the city of Detroit. And the second is an e-bike leasing program, which is the second iteration of the 2020 COVID-19 response pilot. So the purposes of these 2 programs are to, 1, affect Detroiters' behavior around biking in the city. So we want to use this as an opportunity to encourage biking for transportation. The second is to align city departments on programming and future infrastructure investments that support biking for job access. So with the information that we gather and analyze from this pilot, we hope to we hope to use it as an opportunity to spark conversations across city departments. And the last purpose is to shift employers' interest in funding biking options as transportation benefits for employees. So similar to how employers fund parking and bus shuttle services, we want biking to be a part of that conversation. So to go further into detail about the two offerings, the e-bike leasing program was or is made available to 110 Detroit-based employees. We prioritize people or employees who are frontline workers who have not been working from home during the pandemic, who rely on public transportation or do not have access to or limited access to a personal vehicle, and people who are experiencing low wages. So people are and that means they live below the ALICE threshold of roughly $23,000 for a single person and $64,000 for a person, a family of four, excuse me. So participants in the e-bike leasing program are being charged $15 per month, and they will have 24/7 access to the e-bike. For the Detroit Bike Challenge, that consists of 2 month-long challenges, one in May, the other in October, and then we're hosting 3 mini challenges that will be spread between the months of June and September. All challenges are being hosted on Love to Ride, which is a biking encouragement platform. And in the next slide, I will go into further detail about that. So on the platform, individuals, employers, and groups can have profiles. On individual profiles, people can log rides for different purposes, like fun and fitness, if they're biking to work, or if they're biking to a meeting, if they're riding with their children. You can also set goals for yourselves. So people can also set goals for themselves, excuse me. So if you see in this screenshot, I set a goal for myself to take 10 rides before June 1st. The other things that they features on the platform for individuals is the opportunity to share stories and images. So basically, it operates similar to popular Facebook popular social media platforms like Facebook and Twitter. Employers and groups can create profiles. So groups can be community groups, bike clubs, and on those profiles, employers or workplaces and the different groups can see aggregated stats of anybody who's associated with the workplace or the group on the platform. You can send encouraging messages to one another. You can set goals for the workplace or the group, and then for during our month-long challenges, so in May and October, workplaces can also earn points and compete with other employers. So as of right now, we have distributed 101 e-bikes to Detroit-based employees. We will be distributing our last bulk of e-bikes this today. And we have participated in a couple of, and so you see in the image on my left of one of the days where we dropped off e-bikes. As for the bike challenge, we have attended a couple of community events, and this is the Juneteenth event that was hosted by the Department of Neighborhoods District 3 manager, where we had a group ride and was able to distribute some bike safety information and bike resource information to residents. So, as it pertains to the e-bike leasing program, we have 8 participating employers that are spanning across different sub industries. So grocery stores, restaurants, healthcare facility, bike advocacy group, and government and nonprofit. We have 110 participating employees. Again, we have distributed 101 e-bikes already to the Detroit-based employees, and we're going to do our last distribution today. As it pertains to the Detroit Bike Challenge, the city has just completed its first Bike Month Challenge, which happened in May, and Mini Challenge, which happened in June. Within the last 2 months, we were able to get 452 people registered for the challenge. We are currently preparing for our upcoming mini challenge, which is the West Side Wednesday challenge. We are hosting this challenge in partnership with a local bike club, the Lane Bangers Bike Club, who hosts these group rides every week. The mini challenge will kick off on July 19th and run through the end of the month. So if we have any Detroiters on the call, we are encouraging you all to join us in the fun and register for the Detroit Bike Challenge at lovetoride.net/Detroit. And so with that being said, we'd like to thank you for your interest and attention and the opportunity to present at the Snack and Learn. At this time, we welcome your questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Sherelle and Hind, for your presentation. So before moving into the Q&A period, I would like to remind attendees to enter your questions in the question box on the GoToWebinar platform. And also you can download the PDF version of the presentation from the handout box on the dashboard. I will start with the first question. How did you secure vendors to provide bikes and scooters?
So because this was a privately funded project, we did not need to go through city council to get vendors. However, we still did an RFP and ended up having the bikes donated to us through General Motors, which has its headquarters here. While the spin scooters were provided through while the electric scooters were provided through Spin, which is Ford's electric scooter company. So it just ended up being both local offerings.
Fantastic, thank you. What are your metrics this year?
This year, we have 5 metrics for the e-bike leasing program. So they include employer sponsorship, which means getting employers to subsidize e-bike leases for their employees. We have city department partnerships, which is one in this city biking group partnerships. City department partnerships can consist of, helping us get the promote the e-bike leasing program to city employees. City biking group partnerships, which is what we've been doing is collaborating with, but that's more so for the bike challenge, collaborating with local bike groups on the bike challenge. Another KPI that we have is biking satisfaction, and then e-bike leases. Back to the bike challenge, we have biking use, so having people log their rides, especially during bike month. That's when we really can see actively in real time people log their rides. And then outreach events, so participating in those local community events like the one I mentioned that we participated on June 19th in celebration of Juneteenth.
Thank you. Next question is, do you anticipate that this program will lead to the support and development of a bike share program?
Yes, actually, the local bike share program is the one running this. So essentially what we're hoping to do in the long term is to have a strong constituency for biking in the city in general. And what that means is not just supporting the local bike share program, but also supporting infrastructure to have bike lanes in place, supporting the general awareness of bikers on the road, that they still, the public needs to understand that the roads are not just for cars, but also, supporting the interdepartmental collaboration within the city, so that when departments are running programs and thinking about future infrastructure, they're also thinking about the culture that we already have in Detroit around biking and how to support that and promote that. So in a nutshell, yes, we do want to support the local bike share program, even if this program ends up being a long-term leasing program by a different provider. hopefully it will not be run by our office, that we would be, you know, like offering the proof of concept for it to become a program that is standing on its own in Detroit. But we have an unwavering commitment to supporting our locally run NGO that runs our bike share.
Fantastic, thank you. I will take the last question, which is, I think you mentioned most of the points, but what do you hope to achieve in the long run regarding biking in Detroit?
Yeah, so if I were to expand a little bit more on what I said earlier, and Sherelle, feel free to jump in as well. We have some pretty major infrastructure projects that are happening. One of them is a motorless bridge, international bridge between Detroit and Canada, that will support, you know, biking, walking. We also have a plan for the Joe Louis Greenway, which is basically a greenway that will be surrounding the city. It's 27 miles long. So we have some pretty good infrastructure that is already ongoing to help biking in Detroit, and our hope is that by the time that infrastructure is in place, we would have already built the culture and changed the behavior around needing to have a car in order for you to get to work, and changing the perception that riding your car to work is the only professional way to show up at work. So there's a few things that we need to navigate when it comes to culture, but in a nutshell, that's it. It's really moving along so that by the time big infrastructure projects are set in place, Detroiters know where to get a bike, where to fix their bike, which roads to take, where the bike lanes are, and how safe their roads are. Sherelle, I don't know if you have anything to add.
No, I think you captured it all.
Fantastic, thank you. So we are at the end of our webinar session. Please feel free to follow up directly with Hind and Sherelle via the contact details shown on the screen. And I would like to thank all attendees for joining today. Thank you for your time, and thank you again, Sherelle and Hind, for your presentation today.